Cooper Kupp, a Dallas Cowboy? We'll debate it on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, free agency continues to go on. We've had the Cowboys sign a former first-round pick on Tuesday. They extended one of their best players, and we'll get to all of that in a second. But Cooper Kupp is going to be released today by the Los Angeles Rams. We've known that for a couple of weeks. But now there's a report from Benjamin Albright, who's one of the more respected NFL insiders, that says the Cowboys are interested in Cooper Kupp. What do you think of it?
I'm not shocked. I mean, simply because there's just a ton of ties here. Obviously, the most immediate one being that his former wide receiver coach in college is obviously now our wide receiver coach, Junior Adams. So that's an immediate tie. Kevin Gray Jr., actually from 105.3 The Fan, actually tweeted out some very interesting other ties, just to kind of throw these out real quick. And shout out to Kevin Gray, who does a great job on 105.3. Cooper's father, Craig Kupp, was Troy Aikman's backup for the Cowboys in 1991.
Nice.
That's crazy, right?
That's a tie. Yep.
And apparently Cooper's grandfather, Jacob Kupp, was a guard for the first two seasons with the Cowboys. So there are some ties. There's some symmetry here. There's some serendipity that's like trying to push this deal together. But I also think that there's some schematic things that kind of make some sense here. The Cowboys talked about in the Schottenheimer press conference the desire to have more condensed formations, the desire to run the football better. And I think that Cooper Kupp fits those two things to a T, right? He's a really, really good blocker. You have to be in a Sean McVay offense as a wide receiver, or any of these kind of Shanahan style offenses. They require their wide receivers to block in order to create big plays. And then the condensed formation thing is also obviously a calling card of McVay offenses. He has a lot of experience in running routes in tight formations and condensed splits, which is going to be helpful, because I don't think that many of the other Cowboys on this team have a ton of experience with that. And if they are going to deploy that a lot more, it'll be good to have a guy that has that kind of experience doing that, the expertise to kind of do that, to be sort of a veteran presence in that wide receiver room. So it definitely makes a lot of sense. Is it like Davante Adams or one of the top names, or, like an explosive wide receiver too? I don't know if it's that, but I would say that he, even now, still after having lost a little bit from his prime, he's still a very, very high-end wide receiver too, who really kind of fits the bill of a do-it-all receiver who can help you in a number of different ways and really, really raise the floor of that wide receiver room.
So I think I'm generally on that side. Like, go out and sign Cooper Kupp if he's available, assuming it's a decent price tag. I think we saw DeAndre Hopkins sign yesterday, 1 year, $5 million. Maybe Cooper Kupp gets a little bit more than that, but I would assume that's the range, right?
I mean, my brain had it as much as maybe 8 million, 7 or 8 million. But I can't imagine too much more than that.
No.
Right.
Okay.
So I think, there was talk, he announced that he was leaving the Rams like over 2 weeks ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And the Rams have obviously since then been trying to trade Cooper Kupp, which was never really going to happen since Cooper announced that he was going to be let go by the Rams. And also he had a $20 million price tag. So nobody was going to be biting on that. And to me, that means, I think you're looking at a experienced wide receiver, a Super Bowl winner, one time MVP candidate, if I'm not mistaken, at a certain point. So I think, 7, 8, under 10 million, but just under 10 million, I think, is probably his range for someone like that.
And again, I don't think there's really there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal for the most part. You sign into a 1 year, $8 million deal. It works out great. If it doesn't, hey, it's You're not tied to him long term. You move on in 2026. It's no big deal. So again, generally, I'm of that belief. But there's part of me that believes like the Cowboys have to get faster on offense,
Yeah.
and bringing in Cooper Kupp doesn't make you faster, right? One of the things I think I'd love to see opposite of CeeDee Lamb is like an outside receiver that can create, get some man coverage, and that's just not Cooper Kupp. He's a zone beater. The other part of that's really weird is that Cooper Kupp is like best friends with Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, and they're eating like $40 million to get rid of him this offseason. They brought in Devontae Adams, who's older, to replace him. Maybe he's just cooked, Landon, and the next team that gets him is just going to get really a depth receiver. I think that's like the low end of what can happen. But I guess what I'm saying is if the Cowboys sign him, I actually think that's a good move. But I can also see a scenario where we get to week 6 and it's like, okay, now you see why he was released and nobody wanted him.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Cooper as well, the Rams were also shopping Matt Stafford up until about 4 or 5 days ago.
Well, kind of.
It
I think
wasn't
they
exactly
were.
sure like they were committing to him either.
Yeah, but I think
So
that was more like, hey, go see how much money you're worth on the open market,
that's
right?
fair. But I do think that, yeah, I do think that they knew that they weren't gonna, want to look. I mean, $20 million to spend for Cooper Kupp is a lot of money at this
It is.
point, right? And so I can understand wanting to eat the money now while you can, and instead of trying to deal with that later, and then you could roll some cap money over and try to pay for that. You're right. Certainly, this is not a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination. There is a chance that he comes in here and if he gets signed and isn't anything close to what we expected. But I tend to think that he still has something left. I think he's, was fighting through a lot of injuries that he's been trying to get through. If he just had an off season of just sitting on his butt for a little while, maybe, I think he might come back as 20% better receiver than he was last year.
So I reached out to Kim De Silva, who is
Yeah.
the managing editor of the Rams site for USA Today. He's also a Cowboy fan, which I find really funny. There's a bunch of Cowboy fans that used to work over there. But I asked him this morning, I'm like, how washed is Cooper Kupp? And he said, great question. He's definitely lost a step, but he was never super fast anyway.
Yeah.
He did hit over 19 miles per hour in the playoff game against the Vikings.
Oh, wow.
He's slower out of his break, so it makes it hard for him to separate. But as for the Cowboys, it wouldn't be a bad signing, just depending on the money. He still blocks his tail off. He's just not going to pick up many yards after the catch or create big plays, but he would be a massive upgrade over Jalen Tolbert. And I think that's where I'm at. Like, if people expect him to come in and be like a low-end wide receiver 1 or like a 1B to CeeDee Lamb's 1A, I think you're going to be mistaken. But somebody that can come in and almost be like a Patrick Creighton type of receiver. Like, hey, catch 3 passes a game on third downs and move the chains, and that's it.
Yeah, do the dirty work, does it well, right? Yep. And can again, be a great locker room guy, be a great teacher. The man coverage stuff, it's like if we're using a bunch of condensed formations anyways, we're helping folks out in man coverage anyways. So, yeah, I think there are ways to kind of counteract that a little bit. And, every one of these guys has strengths and weaknesses. Now, look, I do think that the reason it wasn't our first choice, right, is because of all the things you said previously. He's not a speed guy. The Cowboys could use a little bit more speed on the outside, right? He's not a man coverage beater. The Cowboys could definitely use another man coverage beater opposite of CeeDee Lamb. But that doesn't mean that he wouldn't be an incredibly useful receiver if he was on this roster, just based on his experience and everything that he does do well still.
All right, let's talk about a signing the Cowboys actually made on Tuesday, and that is Payton Turner, a former first-round pick by the Saints. We'll break it down next. This episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost as much as $100 to $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable than ever before. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. BetterHelp makes it easy to fit therapy into your schedule. Whether you're working, you're parenting, or just always on the go, they are there for you. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Later, the Cowboys signed Payton Turner on Tuesday to a 1-year, $2 million deal that could be up to $3 million. I did see a really funny tweet. Is that I can't remember. I think it was Gary Freeman who said anytime someone's referred to as a former first-round pick, it means that player's bad. And that's how a lot of people were referring to Payton Turner yesterday. But you watched the tape. What'd you see?
First of all, Dante Fowler had a pretty good season last year and was a former first-round pick. There are, I think that's the thing too, honestly. And I saw that tweet as well, and
it's pretty funny, but
it was funny. But I also think you have to. It's like the theory of relativity. You have to put it in the context of what it is, right? Like, yes, would I have? I went back and looked at my notes of Payton Turner, right, when he came out of the draft, 2021. I had him squarely pegged as a third rounder. Right. And so when he got picked at 28th overall, if I'm not mistaken, all of us were really shocked. Right. I get it in some sense, in the sense that, like there's lots of athleticism upside here. But I felt like that is, that's the problem, is that now like Payton Turner's career is always going to be framed in the context of somebody made a mistake, and that wasn't his fault, and overpaid for this guy, and now like everyone thinks that, oh, he's just an underachiever, blah blah blah. Here's the real deal. Payton Turner, incredible athlete for that type of body, like the kind of strong side, closed in defensive end, right? He's 6'6", 270, has 35.5-inch arms with 10.5-inch hands. Absolutely, the template for what you want for that position, right? Tons of production in college. Like, he was really productive at Houston. Really, like on a per snap basis, was one of the best, kind of pass rushers. Just had all these kind of like advanced stats that told you this guy was an incredible athlete. You put on the tape and the Saints tape, and the Saints tape to me looks like the Houston Cougars tape. Like, it looks exactly the same. Like, he hasn't developed a ton. I will say that what he has developed a little bit is a little bit better handwork, but this is still a guy who is needing more and more time on the field. And I think that's really been the issue, right? And that's going to be the issue moving forward. Injuries, right? Here's a list of injuries that Payton Turner has suffered since coming into the league. In 2021, he had a calf strain that was only 2 games missed. Then he had a chest strain in 2022 that made him miss 3 games, followed by a low ankle sprain, which made him miss another 3 games. And then in 2023, he missed 13 games with a turf toe injury, right? And then last year, he missed just 1 game with a knee injury. But I also saw reports in August of last year, at the beginning of training camp, that he had re-injured his turf toe. He had that he was still having issues lingering from that turf toe injury. All of this is to say that he has played only 31 games in 4 seasons with the Saints, right? The guy has played less than half the number of games that Golson has played before he left, right? Like, so he just has not played a lot of football still. And this is the problem. He needs the experience to get better. He has athleticism, and I think he has the ability to become a better football player, but he has to break this cycle of injury causing him to miss time, which obviously slows his development. And you could just tell, like, this last thing I'll say, when he got drafted, like, I even remember thinking at the time, man, I'd love to get on the second contract for this guy, because he just felt like one of these guys who, when you draft, was never going to be fully developed by the time you had to decide whether you wanted to re-sign him. And sure enough, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option because, like I said, at that point, I think he'd only played 13 games or something like that before the 2024 season. And now he's a free agent. So this is a guy that, like, it could go either way, right? Like, maybe he continues to keep getting injured. He can't get healthy. He can't get over that turf toe, properly. He never gets the time on field to develop, and it just doesn't work out for him. Or he gets a little bit of time, healthy. He gets a stretch. I mean, he was able to play most of the season last year, and gets a proper off season, develops a little bit under a new coach. White Cotton has experience with developing these kind of guys. And suddenly you've got a guy who is a low-end starter, high-end backup at defensive end, because he developed and just had some time to be healthy and develop some skills. So I think he was a really interesting signing. Not necessarily a guy that you're writing as a starter, but definitely a guy that has some serious upside if he can just kind of stay healthy for a little while.
So he reminds me a lot of somebody that was John Kaminsky, who I'm sure you remember the Cowboys being interested in. Got drafted by the Falcons, I think it was 3rd round. Plays out his rookie contract in Atlanta. Another one of these 6'5", 275-pound edges. Goes to Detroit, and then doesn't do a lot in year 1 in Detroit. But by year 2, he's somebody that ends up becoming a decent rotational player. Like, this is the risk when you draft these long, athletic players that just need some time and development. Michael Williams, which we'll talk. I almost wanted to talk about him today, but we'll save him for a different day.
Yeah,
you have to let these guys develop, and you need to give them lots of time. Now, here's the issue with Turner: is he going to get a lot of playing time in Dallas? Because he's behind Micah Parsons, he's behind Marshawn Nealon, he's probably behind Sam Williams. He's probably fighting for that 4th edge rusher spot, likely with the draft pick, right? So how much on-field development is he going to get? We'll see. But generally, Landon, like, I'm of the philosophy, like, gamble on these guys in free agency. Like, if you're going to have to take, it's $2 million guaranteed. Like, it's nothing. If it doesn't work out, who cares? Dallas actually has a lot of history and success taking shots on these type of guys. I mean, Dante Fowler was a guy they took a shot on, and it worked out pretty well. I don't expect it to be that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get adequate production for that price tag this year.
Yeah, and again, like I kind of speaking to your playing time snap count question, I think the Cowboys will definitely have more defined roles for each side of their defensive ends, right? Like they're going to have, at least especially on early downs, I imagine they're going to have more specific body types that are these types of body types on the strong side. So I think that he'll probably be fighting for snaps with whatever similar, strong side defensive ends. I think Nealon is probably the guy that he's losing snaps to right now, right? And if D-Law were to be re-signed, obviously he would be on that same spectrum as well. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, you it doesn't cost you a ton. This is a guy that he just needs more time, but you see it in his tape. Like, you see that he has the kind of athleticism. He moves extremely well for his size, and he has power. It just feels like it's an upside play of a different type, right? And that's why they take these former first round guys, right? Is because they are usually guys that are upside players that didn't quite it didn't work out because of the coaching staff. They didn't get the right kind of coaching, or they didn't have enough time at their previous stop. And so you take advantage of that. You see, hey, can I finish the job here and make a complete player? Is there an opportunity that this guy that was only like a few weeks away from kind of getting it was just a different type of coaching going to help this guy understand concepts a little bit better? So sometimes a change of scenery just helps a ton for these guys. And when there's a lot of upside like this, a cheap gamble just makes a lot of sense.
How many snaps do you think he played in the 4 years that he was with the Saints? Just give me a number.
I mean, it's got to be like 200. Maybe he played something like 139 last year or something, right?
He actually had 338 last year.
Oh wait, I'm thinking of pass rush snaps. He had 139 pass rush snaps.
Sorry. It was 139 pass rush snaps, but he's only played 678 career snaps, and that includes special teams in 4 years with the Saints. So he has not played a lot. Now that's the other problem is, like, you can't get better if you don't play a lot, right? We'll see. But again, he's only 26. He just turned 26 in January. He's 6'6", 275 pounds. And we talked about, like, we thought Matt Eberflus was going to try to bring in some bigger bodied players to play on the edge. This is one of them. So we'll see. Can't wait to dive more into his film and tape over the next couple of weeks. But we need to talk about some other signings that the Cowboys made on Tuesday and over the last couple of days. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year. I'll make sure that I share them on X over the next couple of days. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. Plus, you can stay in the action with the tournament games happening almost every single day. There's always something fun and exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long. Again, that is FanDuel.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Lane, I want to talk about the Cowboys special team signings because they signed KaVontae Turpin to a 3-year deal. We'll get to that one in a second, but he's not the only special teamer that they've signed. Trent Sieg, their long snapper, agreed to a deal to make him the highest paid long snapper in the league. Brian Anger got a new deal yesterday, a 2-year deal. The Broncos were trying to sign him. CJ Goodwin returns on a deal. Marquise Bell got a 3-year deal. It seems very much like one of the Cowboys' focuses this offseason was to make sure they kept that special teams unit intact.
Well, the special teams unit was one of the only units that actually performed well last year. So I guess that makes sense, right?
We've got a new special teams coordinator now, though.
Yeah. And maybe that's it too, right? Is maybe they prefer to get some familiarity at the key pieces there, just so that there isn't a bunch of turnover. That it is one of the spots where they shined. They weren't able to retain Bones, and I don't really know if that was a we haven't really heard exactly what the motivation was, if Bones wanted to leave or if the Cowboys wanted to go. But it could just be that the Cowboys are trying to secure as close as they can to the situation that they had last season, right? As far as the pieces that are in play, because they liked the groups, right?
Well, I mean, your field goal unit was one of the best in the league, so it helps to have the same holder, right? Like, I know we talk about you're not paying Brian Anger to be a holder, but that's part of the gig as well, right? So keeping the same long snapper, holder, kicker, that function should be the same. But I want to talk about the Turpin part of this because this is the most interesting part.
Yeah,
the Cowboys had Turpin under contract for the 2025 season, but rather than waiting, they actually got a deal done ahead of time, giving Turpin a 3-year deal with $18 million total. I think he can make up to $8 million in 2025. This is a big raise for him, but one of the things we've heard from several different Cowboy sources is that they plan on using him more on offense this year.
Yeah, and I think that we started to see more of that last season. It does feel like this could have been one of those things that maybe McCarthy was a little bit reluctant to do, but I can just speak to attest to in training camp, they were doing a lot of stuff with him, and I think we reported on that at the time. We saw him, out of the backfield. We saw a little bit of that in the season too. We saw him out of the backfield. We saw him in the slot, but we saw him functioning as a wide receiver in the offense quite a bit with the ones. So, and like I said, we saw a lot of that during the season, but I don't see anything that happened during the season that would make me think that they would reduce that load. In fact, to me, I think it worked quite well. You can increase it. Now, I don't think that solves our problem with needing more speed on the perimeter, trying to get down the field, because I don't think that's necessarily Turpin's game, right? Is like to line up wide and run a 9 route. I mean, he can, and if you don't cover him, he'll catch it. But I don't think that he's high pointing the ball down the field versus NFL corners very well, right? But I think as far as a guy that if you're looking to get the ball to create, obviously there's almost no one better in the NFL. And I think if you can find ways to creatively get him the ball, I mean, it felt like anytime they gave him a jet sweep, they were given 10 yards. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I think more of that will probably be beneficial. You get a guy in here like Clayton Adams that wants to do some creative run game stuff. I can't imagine that he isn't going to want to find a way to use Turpin somehow. Yeah, I think it makes sense that, that they wanted to commit to him a little bit because I think they want to develop a package of plays for him a little, and that, maybe takes some investment. And for Turpin, it's like the guy hasn't really made any money yet until this contract, right? Like he came into the league as a tryout guy. They had him under basically the most restrictive contract, right? That you can. I think he wasn't he an exclusive rights free agent?
Exclusive rights, yeah.
Which is just, like basically slave labor. And so they, he was an all-pro last year. He made the all-pro team as a returner. And so I think part of it is about rewarding their own, but part of it is also investing in Turpin, knowing that, hey, he's 29 at this point, 28.
No, I don't even think he's that old. Let's see. I don't have his whole.
He's a little bit older than like the kind of normal rookie when he came in.
He'll be 29 in August. Yes.
Okay. So why not go ahead and lock up, probably the rest of his prime, right? And commit to making him more than just a kick returner, punt returner, and create a package of plays that really takes advantages of his unique skill set.
So I will say the Cowboys, we hear this every offseason. They're going to use Turpin more. They have. 2022, he had 66 snaps on offense. 2023 was 158. 2024 was 315. So it has been trending in the right direction. And we saw him make some big plays last year, whether it's he had obviously the touchdown against the Texans. He had a play against the Steelers on that Sunday night game down the seam on a big third down conversion. So we have seen this a little bit. What's funny to me is that Brian Schottenheimer was the offensive coordinator and the play caller during Tavon Austin's first year with the Rams. And Tavon had 1,000 yards from scrimmage by doing a lot of the same stuff, drag routes, jet sweeps, bubble screens. I wouldn't be surprised if Schottenheimer dusts off that old playbook and says, okay, here, this is what we want you to be. You're not going to be our number one receiver. You're not going to be our number two receiver, but here's 4 plays a game, 5 plays a game where we're going to try to get you the ball into space. And let's see if you can make a play. If you're paying somebody that much money, I think they have to be more part of your offense rather than just being a returner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think honestly, that amount of money for what he did last year, I think is I mean, not that we're paying him retroactively, but if he repeated what he did last year, I think, and returned the way he did, I think that's an appropriate amount of money for that, right? Like maybe with some more touches, obviously that's what we're looking to trend towards. But I think he's probably getting paid appropriately for what his role is on this team.
I mean, he's the best returner in the NFL, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt at this point.
The other kind of rumor, whisper out there, and again, I have no idea how true this is, but the NFL is looking at potentially making touchbacks go to the 35 this year, which would mean that teams are just going to make sure that they return kicks more often. Who else do you want on the field to return kicks more often than KaVontae Turpin? So I think it's a great deal for Turpin. I think it's a great deal for the Cowboys. They wanted to keep him. He's a really fun player to have, and he's helped you win some big games over the years.
And the guy that, is maybe on the committee that's deciding whether or not the 35-yard is the return line is the guy who actually signed KaVontae Turpin.
Yeah, exactly.
So that might be a little bit helpful.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you want your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.